Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. You know, with the punchy opening, it is Callan, your favorite host. With me, as always, is Mark.
This is your favorite host bit.
And
He's
Neelan.
getting really tired.
No, I mean, it's just natural to say that.
Yeah, it just changes every week.
Wait, do we all say that?
Yeah.
Well, no,
Pretty much.
you two.
Oh, no, we
say
do.
Oh,
it.
the two of
Yeah,
us. But
I've moved on.
You move past it.
My comedic material has evolved.
Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. This is a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends even when you're losing. That last bit doesn't apply to me, but does to my lovely co-hosts. Today we'll be talking about a tantalizing question. And that
Good
question
setup.
is, if you could start over with your collection, what would you change?
Tantalizing.
I'm tantalized.
So this episode is about change, heartbreak, despair, regret, and what comes from new birth.
Yeah. From the ashes, flame.
As always, we will start with the games that we have played this week. And why don't I let Mark kick it off? Because you are just dying of sadness over there to talk.
I am. I'm like a phoenix from the ashes, trying to be reborn. So Neelan and I actually played this game, although not together.
Yeah.
How dare you?
This was
Oh, not together?
no, two different
separately.
sessions. Two different sessions of
How serendipitous.
Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig.
That's
That's
the
Yeah.
stupidest
phrase.
name I've ever heard.
This is a takeoff of Between Two Cities and also the Castle of Mad King Ludwig. It's also like the Palaces of Mad King Ludwig. I don't know if you guys play that.
I actually haven't played that.
It's actually more like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's actually more than, now that I think of it, I hadn't considered this, but it's actually much more like the Palaces of Mad King Ludwig than it is Castles of Mad King Ludwig.
Is it a direct sequel or prequel or more of like an origin story?
I don't know where this falls in the Mad
Canon.
King universe. So in this game, sort of in the same way as Between Two Cities, you are partnering up with the player to your left and to your right. You are getting a stack of tiles. You're picking one for the city that you're building with your partner to the left and one for the city that you're building with your partner to the right. And everybody simultaneously picks two tiles and then reveals them, and then you discuss with both partners which tiles you're going to use for the respective cities. So that's a mechanic that is borrowed directly from Between Two Cities, although this is a much more gamery version than that game. I feel like Between Two Cities was a game that you could pull out with even non-gamers and pretty much get going. What makes this a little more gamery is that the tiles you place, they score points contingent on how you build the rest of the castle. So now, this was also the case with Between Two Cities, but there are much more variations to the scoring in Between Two Castles of Mad King. God, it's just so many.
Rolls
Yeah.
off the tongue.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. I feel like Palaces of Mad King Ludwig was the least popular of the three games,
Okay.
but in Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, if you build three of the same type of room, it activates a bonus. That is the same mechanic that happens in Palaces of Mad King
Okay.
Ludwig. So anyway, the easiest way to sum it up is to call this a much more gamery version of Between Two Cities. So if you like the Between Two Cities idea of working with your partners and trying to maximize both, because like in Between Two Cities, you can't neglect one of your partners and build a super castle on the other side because your score is the lower of the two scores that you get from partnering up. So you have to build with a balance. Games, or at least our game, ended up very close. I don't know if it was the same with
Yeah,
yours.
it was pretty close with ours as well, yeah.
I think it was like 2 points separated first and last, or 3 points. It was like extremely close.
And that is a sign of balance.
Well,
That's
so
right.
it wasn't across the board like that, at least in our game. I would say the winner and the second place were pretty close, but there were a couple
Okay.
of stragglers.
I
Like,
think
it wasn't close across the board.
I feel like the difference between first and last was like 66 to 62 or 63.
Oh, that
so
does
it's super
seem
close.
Inordinately close.
Yeah.
Everybody gets points. Thank you, Mr. Stegmeyer.
I think I prefer this to Between Two Cities just because there's more to think about. Although I think I will still, at least for the time being, keep Between Two Cities because I've brought that out with non-gamers, as I mentioned before, and have had a good time. The simultaneous selection makes for a fast-moving game, and it's pretty easy to teach. But yeah, there's certainly more meat on this one. I was pleasantly surprised by it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think exactly what you said is that Between Two Cities is a game I would recommend to most people to pick up because it's so easy to get into and it's so much more accessible.
Yeah.
But I also think that you're getting to the meat of Between Two Cities after 1 game, 2 games. I don't think I would go back to it as repeatedly as I have. I've enjoyed every play I've had of it, but I haven't had that many plays of it.
And you're not eager to like play it over and over and over
Exactly.
again.
Whereas I felt like as soon as I had finished Between Two Castles, it's just a more complex build.
Yeah.
There are more interesting ways you can combo, more interesting strategies you can go for.
Sure.
I just felt like I would get more out of repeat plays of it, but it suffers for its added complexity.
Yeah,
as a
absolutely.
result.
Yeah. Much more finicky. But that's Between Two.
I'm actually excited to try this, despite the horrible name and the crossover that shouldn't have happened because no one asked for it.
Why are you excited?
Between Two Cities is a great game that sometimes feels just a little bit too samey. So for me, a gamer, having that little extra oomph. It's funny because I don't know that will make it a better game overall, but for me specifically, and for our group, this seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. So that's Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig.
Next up, I wanted to talk about Claustrophobia. This is a 2-player game that just ended on Kickstarter, so what great timing for me to talk about it. This is a older game that just had a version released on Kickstarter. It was sort of mired in controversy, and that controversy was Monolith, the company, had already made all of the games, and they were in a warehouse waiting, and when you back it, it will be delivered by next January.
That is not what Kickstarter is for, Callan.
Kickstarter is not a store.
I mean,
Isn't that like line 1?
Kickstarting their shipping. I don't know. Anyway, Claustrophobia is a very interesting thematic game. This is a dice chucking type game, dice assignment, and then using your armies. So the theme makes no sense. The Holy Roman Catholic Church, I don't know if it's actually the Catholic Church, but a church leader who's named the Redeemer is leading the quote-unquote good guys, and they've broken into hell. And so all of the demons are trying to defend their home, but the Redeemer and his troops are here to kill them all. What is interesting about this game is it's a 2-player game where each faction is completely different, and yet it's quite simple. So the human player is rolling dice and assigning those dice to their heroes. Each hero has a different stat line depending on what you assign the die to them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That will change their health, their movement, and their defense. But as they get hurt and take damage, those lines get crossed out, so you can no longer assign 1, 2, and 5 to this troop. And on that one, you can't assign 2 and 4. And once they run out of lines, they die. So that does this interesting arc where at the beginning of the game, you have unlimited choices, because you roll the 4 die and you can assign dice or die. You can assign them however you want. And then by the end of the game, you're rolling the die and desperately hoping for the right thing to come up. On the demon side, you're rolling dice and then assigning those to special powers, which give you a currency to buy more demons or allow you to do special things if you place all your even dice on this square versus that square. And then there's a very simple system on the board where each guy can move and attack, and then you roll dice to do that attacking. So there's a lot of dice going on. You're hearing the word dice a lot. But this was really fun. Christina and I had a great time. I guess what people do a lot of times is there's scenarios, and they will play one scenario and then flip rolls and play it again.
Okay.
Because the win rate for one or the other is not 50-50. The demon player, at least in the scenario that we did, had all the power, and the humans were just desperately trying to hold on.
Interesting.
So this,
and you felt that varied by scenario?
yes.
Okay.
Well, we only did the one scenario.
Got it.
But my understanding is that it does vary. And the way that this scenario worked is you started with no map, and the humans just needed to get 10 squares to get out. They got like trapped in a tunnel, and they're trying to escape. And so each direction you go, you're getting closer and closer, no matter which way you go. And the demons are sort of spawning at the places you don't go. So they're very thematic, very fun, very quick. Once you learn the system, I'm excited to play it more because you can just bust it out and start playing. That's Claustrophobia. The minis are pre-painted in the Fantasy Flight edition. I know this new one has more miniatures, but I believe they are not painted. I'm sure you can figure out how to get a copy of either the old or the new one, given that a lot of people have just kickstarted the new version.
Right. I've heard nothing but good stuff about this.
It's not our usual jam, I would say. Neelan, you'd be closest to it because you're a filthy casual with Warhammer.
As you're describing it, I'm thinking Space Hulk feels.
Yeah, exactly. I've not played Space Hulk,
Yeah,
but it
it
is
sounds in that
definitely
similar.
in the similar vein.
Interesting. Okay.
It's fun. And I think the good thing is I could take either of you through it. Now that I've learned the system, I think we could be playing in less than 10 minutes and into some fun decisions. It does feel like, oh, the dice didn't do what I wanted them to, but that's fine.
The game's like 45 minutes, right?
Yeah, or less.
Okay,
that's
great.
good. That's great.
Or less. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
And the setup, I believe, for most of them, you're not setting up a board. You're just sort of going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for this kind of experience, it's not something I'm used to doing two-player, but I had a really good time playing Claustrophobia.
Cool. Calvin and I also played a couple of games of KeyForge. We forged some keys.
Did we, though?
Yeah, did we play KeyForge or did KeyForge play us?
Ooh.
I don't know.
That's deep.
Yeah.
And reflective.
Yeah. KeyForge is the card game from Fantasy Flight Games. It is not a collectible game. The chief gimmick is that the only thing you can buy is a pre-constructed procedural deck. So these cost about $10 each. It's a deck of 30 cards, and each one of these decks is completely unique. It's been generated and printed by a computer in a way that no other deck exists like it anywhere in the world. It has a unique name that's on the back of every card. So just that process alone is super interesting. The game is also designed by Richard Garfield of Magic the Gathering fame, so it's probably fantastic.
He has one game this month that I'm still hopeful will be good.
Yeah, that's actually interesting now that you mentioned it. Two card games coming out from Richard Garfield this month. Artifact, which is the digital CCG coming out later this month. So the way that KeyForge works is each of the decks is made up of cards from 3 different factions of a total of 7 different factions that are in the game. And you draw your hand of cards and you pick one of the factions of the 3 that make up your deck. On that turn, you can only play and use cards of that faction. And then you draw back up to a full hand of 6. So there's this idea of like emptying out as many cards as you can in your hand, getting out as many creatures, maybe sort of attacking with those creatures or getting ember crystals with those creatures. And then next turn, you're either just going to be activating those same creatures again, or you might switch to a different faction, play out the cards of that faction, but then you can't use any of the creatures you played in your previous turn. So the only decisions that seem interesting in this is basically that, is deciding which cards you're not going to play in lieu of other cards that you might want to activate. All of this is in service of, if a creature's not attacking, it's collecting ember. 6 ember gets you a key. 3 keys wins you the game.
And so what seems cool about this is that unlike other dueling games that have card costs, you know, you're saving up for that big monster that's going to do something crazy. In KeyForge, you choose one of 3 factions, and then you can play everything you want. And that sounds awesome. You know, play your big dragon, play your big crazy monster, play your crazy spell. But what it does is just allow the board state to change dramatically
every turn.
Every single turn of the game.
I think one of my favorite things that normally constitute games of this type is, like you said, this idea of board state. I might have a stronger board 3 or 4 turns, and then you find a way just to sort of creep the momentum over and sort of maybe eliminate enough of my powerful cards, and then you start building up your side. Board state is sort of constantly fluctuating in a sort of like a wave that goes back and forth over a series of turns. It's non-existent in KeyForge. Like you said, there's no concept of board state because you play out all your great cards. You don't get to do anything with them because the next turn they're all gone. There were so many cards we found that would just deal damage to every creature on the board, destroy every creature, destroy every artifact. I don't know how much of this is representative of just the decks we have, because obviously that's one of those things we can't know. We have 2 very unique decks, and they just might be very mega wipe type decks. Who knows? But it feels like that's what the game is engineered towards, these big swings. And from what I've heard from everyone playing it, that is how most games of KeyForge play out. You're going to do a big power move, and then it's going to be negated. Then you're going to do a big power move, and then it's going to be negated.
And listen, I'm the guy who loves big power moves and making splashy plays and having fun with that. But unless most of the game is sort of fairly even, those big moves don't even register.
That's exactly it.
When that's all you're doing is big move, big move, big move. I have a card here called the Key to Dis, and that's literally 3 words. Key to, and then Dis. D-I-S. And this card, when it's out on your side, I can sacrifice it, which means just discard it whenever I want, and then it destroys every creature on the board.
Right.
And so this is a 0-cost thing. Once I bring it out onto the board, I can play it on any subsequent turn because it has a special modifier that it's even, you can ignore the which faction you need to use to play this.
Right.
So literally, I put this card out when Neelan has a better board than I do, wait until he has all of his creatures out, and then bye-bye, they're all dead. So it negates the fun of Neelan bringing out the creatures in the first place, because you get this powerful monster, you equip him with an upgrade, and the odds that they survive to the next turn are
Minimal.
really, really low.
Yeah. And worse than that to me is there aren't mechanics in the game that make use of the fact that you have a powerful creature out. If I have a creature with a power of 9 out, right, what am I going to do with that on my next turn? I can attack one of your creatures with it or get one crystal from it. I'm not sort of swinging at your head like you would in Magic the Gathering to deal 9 damage, which is half of your hit points. Even those big moves feel just like smoothed out in a way. It's weird.
Our decks have one faction that is repeated between the two of them, and that is the Mars alien faction. And then we both have 2 unique factions. So we have now played with 5 of the 7 factions that are in the game.
So is there ever a reason to hold back cards when you decide to select a faction?
Occasionally.
Not very rarely, but yes, sometimes.
Okay.
But when you get an opening hand,
yeah,
it's almost always you are praying to draw as many of one color as possible, or one faction.
You want to take advantage of
At the risk of just making this all seem bad, there are things I do like about this. I do think the faction selection system is, at the very least, interesting. I don't think it necessarily leads to good games, but it does lead to, you have a handful of 3 different factions, which is the one that I'm going to make the most use of, considering what I have out and what I have in my hand.
Right.
That is a fun decision to make at the top of your turn.
But you're going to have 3 total factions in your deck, right? So if you draw 1 card from a faction, and the rest are from the other 2 factions.
Oh yeah, on that turn you're probably not
never
going to play. Well, actually, that's not strictly true, because you might already have on the board.
Although your board,
5 cards.
Your board is often wiped or is often at risk of being.
So I would say most creatures would probably stick around for a turn and then get wiped on average. So you might have just played 4 cards of a faction on the previous turn. Yeah. And on the next turn, you're not going to get to use them unless you just choose to play that faction again.
Exactly. Okay,
so that's kind of the decision. You're either using what's on your board or you're playing more cards, which is a more interesting decision than it necessarily seems on the surface.
I see, right. Yeah.
Because like every creature you have out is a crystal, which is, one small percent, decent chunk of your end game.
But what percentage of turns, Neelan, do you feel like you're making any decisions beyond choose one of 3?
I agree with you. I think that is the most interesting decision in the game, and then that's pretty much it.
I would say about half the turns, in my opinion, the only decision you're making
what faction to play,
is which of the 3 factions, and then you do everything you possibly can except for maybe one thing that is clearly
bad. And how
bad.
big of a decision is that decision?
Not very big.
Nah, not really that big.
Right. Yeah,
it's certainly novel.
Yeah,
in the card space, but it's not mechanically that interesting.
Neelan and I were riffing on when this game would be recommendable or appropriate, and I think the idea of the 3 of us going down to a local game store and each buying a deck and just goofing off and just not reading through our cards, just starting the game and hanging out and battling.
Yeah. And laughing at the dumb stuff we find in our deck as we play.
Would be fun-ish. But for me, the game is very frustrating because you get invested in it, you want it to be good, and then it's just... Neelan and I played back-to-back games here, and we've played it maybe one other time, and it just doesn't... There's been maybe 1 or 2 times where I felt like either of us did something mildly clever.
Right.
And that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
1 or 2 times.
And more to the point, like those times where it felt like we were making good, powerful moves didn't feel to me like emotionally sad. I almost felt just like sad. Like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get 16 crystals. And I'm like, that doesn't feel satisfying because it just feels broken. It doesn't feel like I made this clever move that I just had the right combination of cards and it was fun to do, but it wasn't satisfying because I didn't build that deck, so I didn't know that combo was in there. Like, it's such an odd thing to take away from, to me, what is the core experience of these sorts of games, which is that sense of personal investment in the deck you're making.
It sounds like a game that you might recommend to like kids getting into card games.
And I think there is value there. And like I can see, like I said, the evening of let's buy a deck each and just bash them against each other for like a couple of hours.
Yeah.
There is something there.
Just sounds from what you guys are saying like the decision space is like so small. Like you could glance at the cards and like the obvious play would be just sitting there.
The idea that anyone thinks that this is going to be a tournament game is out of their mind.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can't predict what will be a zeitgeist or what will be the fun thing, but there's just no way.
I think ultimately, like, I'm genuinely excited for what the process, this procedural idea, not that Fantasy Flight is making good use of it right now, because Discover is also apparently not doing great, but I genuinely think this is a cool concept. I want this idea of proceduralism in board games to sort of pan out. I don't think KeyForge is the right product to prove it.
I'm right there with you. When Richard Garfield said at Gen Con that he was specifically trying to design something to combat net decking, which is just looking up the best cards for any game and then building the best deck and then winning. This was a way to combat that. I was in love with that concept.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because I love the idea of these trading card games-ish, but I do not have the time or money to play them.
Yeah.
And this was the hope of that.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I really wanted the card game that wasn't going to rely on deck construction. And yeah, this isn't it. That is KeyForge.
Cool. All right. So now we are on to our featured topic, which, as we discussed earlier, is tantalizing. Is that what we said?
Yes. At least I'm tantalized. I believe that's why I'm tantalized.
So we are looking for things that if you restarted your collection right now, things you would keep in mind or things you would do differently. Anyone want to jump in with a thought? I can go first. I'm happy to.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So I will lead by example here and help these guys understand the topic, because I think they're still lost in their time machines. One small thing I would do is I would own less two-player games. I have quite the collection of two-player games, and I don't actually really enjoy playing two-player games that often. I love innovation, and I love some other small two-player games, but I always get excited. I read up on Board Game Geek, or I hear someone talk about a two-player game, and I think, that sounds fun. And then I buy it, and then I don't play it.
Yeah. I don't buy two-player games.
You already had figured out that lesson. I'm learning now, but you had already known that.
One step ahead of you, as usual.
I think I'm pretty happy with the number. I probably have a little bit more than I need, but I'm...
Of two-player games specifically?
Of two-player games, yeah. I mean, for instance, like, I literally played Patchwork last night, and that's a two-player game I'm going to keep forever. Innovation is obviously also one that I would hang on to, but yeah, you're probably right. Like, you probably don't need that many two-player games. I feel like if you have the person that you're probably going to be playing those games with, you're going to gravitate to one or two good ones that you both enjoy.
Right, that makes sense.
And just hit those repeatedly.
Right.
Cool. Who's up?
I wouldn't have purchased as many party games as I did early on. I mean, I guess it was sort of like a byproduct of like the people I was gaming with. I was gaming with non-gamers, which is fine, which is, and I'm happy I have some party games, but I was just really eager to play with these non-gamers a lot.
Make other people like you.
Right. Desperately trying to make other people like me, as I
try hard.
Always do. So I gravitated towards anything that was light enough to teach people who weren't like necessarily interested in heavy games. I was quick to pull the trigger on. And now that I have more established, more gamery groups, a lot of those games are games I really don't have much interest in playing. I keep a couple of the better ones around, but a lot of the party games that were just sort of like light fluff have long since been traded or sold or are in my collection despite not playing them. So I would have definitely still bought party games, but I would just been a little more judicious about those initial purchases.
I have a little bit of that too, where I probably have more lighter games than I would ever play. And I do this dumb thing where even just recently, like I bought Skull a few weeks ago and I haven't played it. I buy these games thinking I'm going to play them.
Skull's great.
Skull is great.
But
I've never had I just haven't had the opportunity to play it. Like, I just don't have that many of the right people that would want to play a light game, It's hard to say it's a biggest regret because I don't have that many of them, but I certainly have a few very heavy games that I just rarely ever have the time for. Or at least rather, I would say very lengthy games. And they're games that I wouldn't necessarily want to kill from my collection, but like Through the Ages, for example, Mage Knight, Forbidden Stars, these are all games I want to believe I'm going to play, but never realistically will ever have the time to play because they're all 3-4 hour games.
So this touches on perhaps my broadest topic, and I think it's exactly right. And I have this phrased as, if I could go back in time, whether or not with a time machine, and start my collection over, I would not buy so many quote-unquote good games with a very specific use case.
Yes.
So that's Skull for me, honestly.
Yeah.
It's like Skull is a game I love and own, but I've played it a lot. I've gotten a good use out of it. But you buying it, you see it on sale somewhere. You're like, I know this is a good game.
Yeah, you're right.
At some point, I'll play that, and you buy it. Or a Forbidden Stars. For me, like Ingenious, Through the Desert, I've got a lot of these where I know they're good games, and I like them.
Yeah.
Dixit is another one. Concept, I still have not played my copy of, but it's where you play a game 1 or 2 times, and you know it's great, you know you like it, but you're just never
going to play it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah, I feel like that's one of those things that it's also hard to gauge until, because you buy it believing you're going to play it.
Right. You never buy it. Yeah.
You never buy it if you don't think you're gonna. No. Yeah.
But I think there's this. Let's take Forbidden Stars, and not to pick on Neelan, though I do love to pick on Neelan.
Sure, me too.
Obviously, 2v1. Our castle and/or palace would be way greater. Than
Right. Then.
Forbidden Stars. You have that.
Yeah.
How many times have you played it?
Twice.
And here's my hypothesis,
Yeah.
okay, that's related to what I just said. If Forbidden Stars was a great game for you, and let's not talk about the relative merits of Forbidden Stars.
Sure.
It's too long, but that's the relative merits of it. But if Forbidden Stars were a quote-unquote great game for you, it would be played more.
I don't necessarily agree, because I certainly have the interest in playing Forbidden Stars. It's being a game that's very good at 2 players. Even finding one other person that has the requisite interest in like Warhammer 40k or big, heavy strategic combat games. I just don't even know who
guess,
one person, let alone 2 or 3.
Well, you're looking at 2 of them, right?
Sure, but I mean,
have you ever asked us?
It's a 5-hour game.
Yeah.
I mean, we could. Let's do Forbidden. Are we doing Forbidden Stars? Are we doing this right?
Cut the
I love
podcast.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, you presumably have a group that would be, because I mean, I feel like Kellen and I would be game to do it.
We've spoken about this at various points of like, let's take the day and do these big long games. I mean, the reality is that the opportunities don't often present themselves.
Right.
So Forbidden Stars, and this is going to sound really silly, but this is like a very specific thing where I know that I would love to play this game with my brother, for instance. We're both 40k fans.
Right.
I bought this because it was going out of print, and I knew that it was a game that was so in my wheelhouse that I kind of had to have it. I can envision a future where I do play this with specific people. But it just happens so rarely.
Isn't that the danger, right? Is that
is
when
exactly
you click
it.
buy, you can always envision a future where you could see yourself playing.
No, exactly. And I think that's what this episode's about, right?
I think what we've hit on for Forbidden Stars is perhaps not the greatest example for you, because there's some heritage there and some family. If there was a Pokemon game, I would have it in my... No, truly, I would have it even though I might never play it, and that's dumb. And the Pokemon Master Trainer game is quite good if anyone is into it. I don't own it, but I will play it with you.
Here's a weird related example. Like Through the Ages, for example, is a game I bought knowing I would probably never play. But I love it. It's probably one of my favorite games. Prior to that, I'd only ever played it digitally or with a friend's copy. And then when the new edition came out, I was like, I have to have this. This is one of my top 5 games. How can I not own one of my top 5 games?
That's fair.
So,
but I knew I would never play it.
I
haven't played it yet.
Part of what I'm rejecting,
yep,
and what I'm pushing against you here, and I'm a culprit. So let me first say, I'm a victim. No, that's right. I do this. If Through the Ages were one of your top 5 games, it would be played more.
I don't think that's... I mean, that depends on how you define, like...
I have started to get introspective about Cosmic Encounter, for example, is frequently cited as my number 1, and I am questioning myself. I'm wondering if my memories of playing Cosmic Encounter are actually the best gaming memories I've ever had, and notice you 2 yuckfucks weren't there. Or if, in fact, it is my favorite game. And Cosmic, it has heritage, it has legacy,
That counts.
Wait, I'm sorry. Are you saying that you are confident that the memories you have of Cosmic are
my favorite board game memories ever?
But you're questioning whether or not the game is your favorite game?
Correct.
Okay, I wasn't clear about that. Got it.
And I mean, obviously, we're going to have to start defining things that you postmodern people won't want to define. Like, what does it mean for a game to be
I don't think it's... Is that even important, though? Is that even... If it's one of your favorites, why not just grant that it's one of your favorites?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's
we're trying to define regret.
Right
here. And anyway, it is related tangentially, but I understand. We can get back to the topic. Mark, do you have another one? I feel like we've talked a lot without you. He has no regrets, guys.
That's true.
Every life decision he's made has been the right one for that time in his life.
That is absolutely true. No, it is not true. I guess for as much as I like trading and math trading and doing all this stuff, I regret going so hard in the board game speculation thing. Although it's fun, it is fun, but I feel like it got silly at points. I would trade for value, just knowing there's a trade in the future. I mean, I still like that to some extent, and I will always do that, but I was doing way too much of it.
And now you don't even have a home.
Okay.
This is actually scarily introspective. All of a sudden, remark on the maybe math trading was a mistake.
No, math trading was not a mistake. And actually, just after taking a couple months off of national math trading, I just got back into it, which is the thrill that I remembered it being. But it's just like, knowing games were going out of print, and then I would like strike for those, even though like I didn't have too much interest in even playing them. Just the speculation, just going a little overboard on the speculation. Mm-hmm. Math trading, to be clear, is awesome. Everybody should try it at least couple times. But yeah, I feel like I owned and probably own too many games that I didn't really have too much intention on playing. So
Horse Fever.
Horse Fever, I thought I heard good things about, but that actually was traded in the math trade. So goodbye.
You got sucker.
Goodbye Horse Fever, and it's CD. It's audio CD, background CD. So yeah, I mean, I'm certainly like an edge case for the degree to which I did it, but I think people do that. Like when you hear about games going out of print and stuff like that, I think there's a rush to grab it or grab those games, and I get it, and I still would probably do it myself. But there's obviously there's a line that you can cross, and I think I just spent again too much shelf space, too much time getting games just for the speculative aspect of the trading.
Yeah, I think that's true for me as well. Because I mean, I think too, the grabbing games when you're afraid they're going out of print is something I've been very guilty of.
Fury of Dracula?
Fury of Dracula being one of them, yeah. Still haven't played it. I'm sure it's great.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I bet it's fantastic. The longer I don't play it, the longer I will never know. So that's good. I definitely also have like a sudden abundance of campaign games that I have no chance of ever playing or even hoping to get through.
But you can think about them. You know that someday...
I can imagine that one day
you'll have the group for them.
The right group for them, exactly.
Okay, I'll knock out some of these here because these two are unwilling to admit their own failings. As it always is, I bring you the voice of the people.
The voice of failing. Yeah.
The voice of the common man versus these two who have never apparently done anything wrong. This is very specific. I would avoid Kickstarter content for games, Kickstarter add-ons that only add variety to the game. This is very specific, but games like Arcadia Quest, Cool Mini or not is notorious for this, where they're like, well, you could have 6 bosses, but if you pledge $30 more, you could have 17 bosses. And then you think, wow, well, that's 6. I could have 6 games. Or, and if you add that add-on with that add-on and you multiply that, that's 500 different games.
Right.
How many times have I played these games?
So does this go for like expansions that are sold? Is that what we're like sort of talking about? Or is there more specific than that?
Right?
Expansions are definitely part of this.
Okay.
I think any time that I have gone all in or got more to something to add to the variety of it, I would say 9 out of 10 times that has been the wrong decision for my collection.
Right.
I think that's fair. Yeah, Rising Sun is maybe a good example of this, where half the Kickstarter extras have just not been touched. Even in the many games of Rising Sun I played, like it just doesn't need that much.
And it's so interesting, right? Because Rising Sun is great.
Yeah.
And I think in a former life, 5 years ago, I was one of those guys who would not want the game if I couldn't have everything from the game. Yeah. Because if I love the game, then I want all of it.
Right.
And like Blood Rage is one that everyone is always trying to get those extra 4, monsters that kind of hurt the game balance.
Right.
They're not worth it.
Yeah.
And I sold them to some sucker out there and bought an entire copy of Rising Sun. So thank you, yuck fuck.
I think this is a good one. There are games that I would say I went in hard on, a year or two ago that I wouldn't have. I would just have the base game probably of Scythe being one of them, Rising Sun maybe being another one, where specific games. Funny enough, we spoke about this with the blinging episode. Like these games, I went really hard on like investing in that. I just don't feel that strongly about, like 2 years removed from them.
It feels like Rising Sun might be an example of one that works, right? The extra factions and
it
whatnot.
does. I mean, I don't think I need them, really. I think the thing I appreciate most about the Rising Sun Kickstarter is just the component upgrade side of it, really. Just like the nice plastic strongholds and stuff. But I don't feel like the extra monsters, the extra factions are not what I necessarily need from that game.
Well,
I'm sorry. This has never been like a problem for me. Like, never made sense to me to buy an expansion for a game that hasn't come out yet. I feel like an expansion is like, by definition, something that expands a pre-existing game. And for a game to be like, to come out with like, isn't that just the game? Like,
I would agree with you, Mark, but they conned us in Rising Sun. You couldn't get component matches unless you bought the expansion then and there.
Right.
And I think it's very interesting because Cthulhu Wars is a weird example where all of the factions, I think, are great to have because they change the game completely. But then there's a ton of add-on, do you want the neutral this? Do you want the monsters? And none of that increases my enjoyment of the game.
Agreed.
So that might be a specific one, but there may be people out there, who play, I don't know, Arcadia Quest over and over again, and having 4 different endgame bosses actually does matter to them. In the modern board gaming world, I don't see that, and I don't see that in any of the groups of people that I play with. I'd be interested in hearing, if anyone wants to email me at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com when you've gone all in on something, and Spirit Island, has a new expansion Kickstarter.
And this one I'm proud of myself. I mean, I did not back the expansion. I haven't bought the previous expansion because I've kind of come around to this idea that there is enough content in the base box to cater to the number of times I'm likely to play it in the near future. So I feel like this is a turning point for me.
Anyone else? You got more? Or are you guys just going to have me list all of my regrets?
I need more solo games. I would probably place most of my collection with solo games, given how much more enjoyment I get out of them.
As it were.
Than playing with either of you.
As it were.
As it were.
Another one that I'd like to talk about, and I'm just full of regret, is buying games that someone else in your regular play group owns. This is something Neelan and I have sort of started bartering about. It's like, well, are you going to get that game or am I? That happened with Mezzo, the most recent Kickstarter from Colossal Games. That was a Rising Sun discussion. We like a lot of the same games, and maybe at some point, one of us will move to Tokyo and take their collection with them. And then the other person will not have those games.
Right.
But in the grand scheme of things, you really are not, unless it's that one special game. And like I said, even my one special game, Cosmic Encounter, I haven't played in 2 years, or I played it once in 2 years. You don't need it.
Yeah, right. When I was playing with the bigger number of different groups, I was less inclined to follow that piece of advice. But now that I'm mainly playing with you guys and our extended group, I am much more unlikely to buy a game if somebody else has it, because I know it's going to be available. And if somebody moved away or whatever, unless it's some crazy out of print game, you're going to be able to get it, or you're going to be able to get a similar experience from another game. There's so many games out there that, not having one in your life is not going to be a big deal.
Well, and that's sort of the question, right? Is there a game that you love so much that had it been completely Kickstarter exclusive, that you would now be gutted and willing to spend double or triple on eBay to acquire? I'm not sure that I have one, even though I genuinely love playing games, playing Kickstarter games.
How many games fall into that?
Oh, no, so very little. I'm making this to illustrate. Is there any game in-ish? Is there Cthulhu Wars? Is anything, and those are like examples for me that might be close, but even still not close enough that I'd be so upset if I didn't get them, but then somehow the FOMO, gets me buying it, and that's my copy.
I see what you're saying.
I'm sort of rejecting the notion, let's dig a little deeper and unpack this, that a board game collection is in fact a collection. And this is something I've been reminiscing on and sort of fondling in my hands, as Neelan would
running it through your fingers,
love to do. I feel like we trick ourselves into buying more games for the collection, so to speak. These good games that you don't love, but are good. I have a couple Animals on board, and some of these I'm going to bring home and play with my family for Christmas once, but we'd probably have liked to have just played Telestrations or Codenames more. You think that you're curating this sort of collection that represents you and your lifestyle, and really, this sounds dumb, but a lot of people do this with books. I know movies has been very popular in previous generations before Netflix.
And it always leads to that exact same moment of you standing in front of your collection and still not having any idea what you would want to play from it. It seems like however arbitrarily large it gets, like you want to have a collection that caters to like every ideal circumstance, but then it just
1 player, 2 players,
Yeah.
4 players, competitive.
4 players light, 4 players heavy, more than 4 players. It's a sort of absurd.
Party
because,
games for 8.
right? Because you'll have those, and once you have a game that satisfies every condition, you're still not going to feel like it's necessarily the game you're going to. It's all pointless. What are we doing?
We are full of regret.
But seriously, I mean, there is like the Through the Ages argument speaks exactly to that need for this idea that I need this game that represents my tastes, even if I'm not going to play it. And that is a dumb argument, I would say. That
You're a smart man. Here's the question, and I think that maybe when we saw Mark's countenance and demeanor when he came in, we shouldn't have done such a heavy topic tonight, because I feel like it's really weighing you down, man.
Well, I mean, actually, I don't know. I feel a little bit of a pushback welling from within.
You love your
you're
collection.
back in on bath trading.
Oh, I am, because you know what?
I'm back, baby.
Because you just brought up Fury of Dracula, which I've acquired twice and flipped twice for like more value, which was great. And also you mentioned Rising Sun, which I got the extras just because I knew I could sell them for a lot more, which was great.
How did that go?
Fantastic. Bought 3 copies of the expansion for $50 each and I sold them for $3.75. So that was good.
I do think that edge case is not in the spirit of what we're
No,
like.
that's
Can
true.
you make money
but
buying
that's,
and selling?
That's actually, but that's not what I was pushing back on. Actually.
Okay, great.
What I was pushing back on is the collection side of it. I think for me, like the most important qualifier is that you're not getting a collection that is outside of your means, right?
Yeah.
You don't have the money for it. You're spending your money poorly in getting these games, or you don't have the room for it, or whatever, or you're never going to play the games or whatever. If it's outside your means, obviously you shouldn't have a collection that breaks that. And I understand that collections can get too big and they can be like silly. You have like 5 of the same type of game, but why do you have them? But you know, these games all have different themes, and just sometimes you want a game that is, I don't know. We're all into board games, and we all like are talking about the newest board games because there's something inside us that likes this variety.
The man inside of me.
Right. So I don't know. I just think there's something natural about wanting to collect, wanting to have, like you were saying, Nillian, with Through the Ages. I understand it's a game that you do like it. It's one of your top 5 games,
Right.
top whatever games.
But that's disputed.
Sure.
Asterisk.
What?
Yeah.
No.
There's
no
a
one's
Kellen
disputing that.
asterisk. What are you talking
Kellen
about?
asterisk.
But maybe you haven't played it in a while. But I still,
Or ever, in this
In
case.
this case, yeah.
But you know, I
played half a game once.
it still feels right to me that you should have it.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, so here's my analogy, right? Which is that my hope with owning a game like Through the Ages is someday there will be someone who will be like, okay, this is the game that you're gonna love this. Come over, we're gonna play this
Right.
once, and I'll be able to share that with them, and they will love it because it's the same reason I own books that I've loved. I'm not rereading those books
Right.
regularly, but at some point I want to share this with someone.
Yes.
This is important to me.
This-
I want to show you this.
Yeah, this defines me. TM asterisk. I haven't played it in 10 years, and I think it represents me, but really doesn't.
You're disputing the idea that.
Well, I'm disputing the idea that your things represent you.
Oh, I mean, sure, but but at some extent, like if it's something I like, I want you to.
But I'm also disputing that you like it, right? Because you don't play it.
That's so unfair because it's
Is it?
so specific.
I think it's unfair.
How often do you watch your favorite film?
I mean, I do think that's different.
Only because it takes less time and is more accessible. Board games have such an overhead of accessibility to them.
I think, over the episodes we've waxed and waned about the differences between movie collections and books and as a medium.
Mm-hmm.
Games, to me, feel more like sports in a lot of ways. And I know that's not exactly right, whereas like a book or a movie is more similar, where it's an activity, right? So if you said, what are your 5 favorite activities? And then you haven't done your favorite activity in 10 years.
Interesting.
I mean, I'm not saying Through the Age. I'm really, truly.
No.
What I'm
that's
saying
interesting though, because like a book and a movie, you saying you enjoy it is referring to an experience you've had, whereas a game is an experience that you want to partake in.
But I get what you're saying. It's an
black
interesting.
and white.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I think it's an interesting way to see it. But I still think showing somebody or saying that you like a heavy Euro is illuminating something about yourself. It's like, I like this puzzle. I like games.
I like to present myself as someone who thinks a lot. So, okay, well, I will never dispute that you can say, here are my top 5 games. I'm saying that part of why Cosmic Encounter is my number one game, and that's quote unquote, is because I like what it says about me. Because it's a very specific type of experience full of zaniness and alliances and friendship. And even my persona, as it were, on the podcast, right, as the, like, it's all about the people man, Cosmic Encounter fits that to a T. So the question is, do I actually is Cosmic Encounter my favorite game of all time? Well, how many times have we played it together? Because the answer is once. But like we've talked about, as an experience, it is the best experiences I've ever had playing games. I think there's an interesting nuance here, and I'm not...
Yeah, I think so too.
So specifically, you're disputing what?
I would say don't buy games that are garbage, okay? Don't buy outside your means. Don't buy garbage, okay? But there's something reflexive in me about saying to people who like board games, don't buy board games.
Yeah, I don't know how you can begin to make that argument.
I didn't make that argument. Don't buy board games? When at any point have I made that argument? I think what you're hinting at is I have a bias against consumerism, a little bit, and a bias over the course of the podcast. We've talked about collections, and I've sort of been the one saying, hey, having all of these games actually hurts you as a person. There's the overhead of buying the game, storing the game, keeping the rules in your memory, you know. And so we sit on sort of opposite planes in many ways. You with your every game under the sun collection.
Right.
And, you know, me in my infinite wisdom only keeping the best of the best games.
Right.
So I think I understand what you're hinting at, but I don't believe what I'm saying is don't buy games, because I still, truthfully, I buy games now, and this is very specific, right? I buy games now, and if we play them once, I feel fulfilled with that game. Sure. And I have the disposable income that's okay.
Right.
And actually, anticipation and preparation for this episode, I went through my collection and realized that I needed to get rid of about another 20 games or 30 games. And can you take them, Mark?
I just think that it comes down to, obviously, and maybe you would agree with this, like prima facie, like it comes down to personal preferences, obviously, right? Like, I know that you have issues when it comes to the size of a collection being unwieldy, or this rules overhead that you have to keep in your head, or just like the time investment that is maybe not going to pay off. Whereas for me, those are not issues. But I can see where you're coming from. But I mean, just genuinely, I don't have a problem with, to take one sub issue like this, like rules overhead that you've talked about, where like you feel a burden of like getting the rules.
Right. So that anxiety that I have is not shared by you.
Right.
And so that is just suddenly a non-issue.
Right.
And so then what objective issues can I levy against you having 500 games?
Well, I think the objective issue is
can you
outside your
afford it?
means. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
One of the most clarifying moments of my life was I found myself talking to an older man at his door. I was going door to door selling stuff, and he was like, had to be in his 80s, and he was alone, and he invited me in. We sat down, we talked for like 45 minutes, and all he wanted to talk to me about was his watch collection. This man lived alone, was desperate to talk to me. Like, it was very clear that we could have talked all day, and had 400 watches, it must have been.
Yeah.
Just every room was cases of watches.
Right.
To the point that he gave me a watch as I was leaving.
Right.
And I want to be very careful with how I articulate my experience with this man, because I don't and do want to project onto him just this loneliness of his, what I perceived his existence to be, which was all in pursuit of acquiring watches. Maybe that, and that's so reductive to his life. I met him once,
right?
but I left his house borderline feeling like collecting was like closer to a disease or closer to like something that I should actively not want for myself.
Right.
And that the collecting that would bring me happiness is in the people that I surround myself with or collect, so, as it were.
Sure.
And so I'm 100% not joking that experience colors my life still.
Yeah.
And it's weird.
I get that you're saying it and it's very palpable. It's visceral when you're saying it. And I understand that totally. But what would you say to the argument that we are collecting things that are social in their very nature?
And I think that's why I'm here, right?
Okay.
But it's in the pursuit of that I just feel like we delude ourselves into acquiring more when it doesn't give us more.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Almost constantly.
Right. I would just say that I think collecting is part of human nature. I think just people are wired to collect. I just think it's like ingrained. I think it can certainly get out of hand, obviously, but I just think that it's something that naturally gives humans pleasure. And I think that as long as you understand where your lines are and where you can like avoid going overboard, I just think it's a natural thing. People have shoe collections, people have clothing collections. I think it's a natural thing that people will enjoy doing and will always enjoy doing. And I don't think if kept in check is a bad thing. I just think
I think there is value in stepping back and asking yourself why you're collecting a
That's
thing,
fair.
though.
But I don't think you should be riddled with guilt about it either.
No, I don't agree with that either. And to the extent where, the closest I come to sort of redoing my collection in any form is when it comes to the math trades and the flea markets. I'm like, okay, what are the games I know I want to get rid of?
Right.
And ultimately, I don't turn over that many, relatively speaking, because I know that I have the games I have in my collection for a reason, and I can remember the reason I had them, and whether or not that I'm being rational or honest about what that reason is. And to some extent, it still exists. I do think there is an inherent danger of, the idea that you would just have shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of board games for like every possible circumstance like that. That does feel inherently dangerous. I guess.
Yeah. I just think that fighting what I think is human nature, maybe to the point where you feel like guilty, I think that's dangerous or like self-harming.
Yeah, or potentially worse than the problem that we're
trying to
articulate.
Avoid. Yeah.
Or the problem that I'm trying to articulate.
Right.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
One last little bit.
Yeah, get a last little bit in there, dude.
The guy arguing against collecting is a guy who is currently wearing a Pokemon sweater and the tagline, I believe, for Pokemon is "Gotta catch 'em all." So, guys in glass houses should not cast stones. That's what I'm saying.
I might have to talk to my therapist. Wow, Mark. So that about wraps up our discussion today on the things we would change with our collection if we could go back in time with or without a time machine. For next week's episode, we really want to do reader questions. We've had a lot of success doing topics suggested by you guys, but we'd love to just answer some questions. So if you guys have questions or comments that you'd love us to react to live on the podcast, as it were, you can email those to boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. We will likely read them, and we will likely answer them next week. So send us those questions. As always, you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us at our guild, boardgamebarrage.com/guild. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. We will get back to you. We will reply.
And subscribe to our YouTube channel because big things are coming.
We're also going to be giving away a copy of the new Azul game, Azul Sintra. Is that how you say this?
Azul Stained Glass of Sintra.
And we're going to be giving that to someone who likes us on Facebook or someone who follows us on YouTube. So if you want to enter that, just make sure you follow us on both of those places. We'll be doing a drawing here in about 2 weeks' time. So that's Azul, the new one. I'm excited for it. You should be too. Once again, thanks so much to Heart Society Music for letting us use their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. Let me tell you, I sing this song to Christina at least twice a day. What's on your mind, kid? Thanks so much. Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
And has the Rusviet
Faction.
This is a good joke, but I don't know it. You got to help me make it. Don't you dare edit this. Has the Rusviet
Okay.
Faction. I'm not still sure what the joke is.
Dropped us into post-apocalyptic Scytheland.
It's the Rusviet faction.
Well,
that's
because
hilarious.
they're all fighting.
Definitely got to keep this.
All right, keep going. I'm sorry. I lost
I'm
it.
not sure where you were going with it.
But it's like, because we're in Stegmeyer land.
Okay, I see. So, but
And so is this, where in the timeline are we?
I think you could just say, like, where does the Rusviet faction show up?
No, because it's the post-apocalyptic Cold War thing.
This
Where
is-
are we in time?
The sign of a great joke is that it needs a very
We're
long
workshopping it
discussion.
for
Yes,
5
right.
minutes.